Welcome to my show, When Everyone Wins, where a key goal I have for you is shifting from power over and under to power within and between. I'm your host, Judy Ryan. In each episode, I'll share my knowledge from decades in workplace culture transformation and leadership development as the founder and CEO of LifeWorks Systems. I'll help you build trust and emotional and social intelligence. My show, When Everyone Wins, is about creating a life you love and helping others do the same. Welcome to the show, everyone. Today's topic is on a civil society, and boy, do we need that. This civil society of all people, for all people, and by all people. What the world really needs right now, especially at this time, are solutions that are only possible through individual empowerment that leads to trustworthy collaboration and civic engagement. This requires an understanding of the conditions and conversations that create a civil society in which people show up as the best that they can be. Unfortunately, most people don't know what these conditions are or how to ensure that healthy people strategies are adopted. Without the right mindset, common language, set of tools, and the necessary support, the ability to create win-win outcomes and civil society is unlikely. The kind of person that models and articulates this so well is represented in my guest today, Terri Williams. Let me tell you a little bit about Terri. First, Terri is passionately of the belief that government of the people, for the people, and by the people is one of the most important phrases ever uttered in human history. She strongly promotes the importance of shared power, critical thinking, civil society, and civic engagement. Terri walks her talk. She served as the mayor of Webster Grove, Missouri, and after her term in office, she was the executive director of the Webster Grove's Shrewsbury Area Chamber of Commerce for 4 years. She was also appointed the Citizens Advocate for St. Louis County Government and subsequently the Taxpayers Advocate. Terri's also an expert in leadership development, emotional intelligence, customer service, and communication. In fact, she has worked as a Culture EX consultant and trainer with my company, LifeWorks Systems, where she has helped create leaders that other people want to follow. Utilizing her expertise in writing, editing, and public speaking, Terri founded Moonstone Meaningful Marriage Ceremonies, where she has the honor and privilege of officiating highly memorable and meaningful weddings and has been doing this for the past 10 years. Terri also has a bachelor degree in philosophy and a master's degree in international relations, both from Webster University, where she was honored to receive the Webster University Distinguished Alumni Award. Last but not least, one of my favorite things about Terri is her purpose statement, which is to cause inspiration, transformation, and laughter. And boy, does she do all of that. So welcome to the show, Terri.
Hey, Judy.
We've had to practice being civil society, haven't we?
I mean, first of all, you make me sound so good. Thank God you didn't say anything about my technological lack of expertise. Other than that,
hey, we can't be all things to all people. So,
trying a speech or a wedding, just don't ask me how to sign up for a Zoom call.
Okay. So, Terri, why do you think there's so much that is so uncivil right now in the world today?
I think it's a really scary time for a lot of people, not just in our own country, but in countries around the world. There's lots of shifting viewpoints, and people are kind of trying to find their way through different types of political systems, and not just in our country, but in other countries too. People, thanks to social media, which can be a real benefit, has also been a real negative in the sense that people get into silos and only hear the same thing from the same group of people. There's a dearth of facts, of people willing to trust in institutions that build a civil society, our educational systems, our governmental systems, our healthcare systems, you name it. Those are just a few of the pillars of a civil society. And over the last 40 years or so, a lot of those things, unfortunately, have been undermined, which creates it creates a lack of trust. It creates people being afraid. It creates, people not having access to the facts that they need to make well thought out decisions on behalf of themselves, their families, their communities, much less their country.
Yeah.
So,
And you know what? Knowing you so well, I would also say part of what has made it uncivil is that women appear to be rising, which is seeming threatening to some that are really attached to the patriarchy, which has always been a win-lose kind of
100%.
situation.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge problem. I mean, there's been a backlash against women. I mean, if you just like look at the Taliban as a glaring example in Afghanistan, but around the world, there's been a backlash because a lot of people, whether it's women between women or men between men or men and women, like certain elements of those constituencies do not want to share power because they see it as a threat rather than something that can enhance their lives and make their lives better, because it's all about being power grounded. The whole idea of power over versus power within, and to have that shared power. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So you and I share that belief in the importance of that shared power, that power for one another, that power with one another. What are some of the stories and beliefs and experiences that you've had in your own life in raising your family and being in politics and being in education and being in weddings that have really cemented the value of power within and between rather than power over and under?
well, first of all, well, like you mentioned, we've done work together in emotional intelligence. And before that, I did a lot of certified in conflict resolution skills. And so when I became mayor of Webster Groves, quite a while ago when I was but a child, I brought all of those skills with me. And we had a situation where there was a developer of a nursing home or rehab home or whatever, a retirement home for folks. And their property crossed a line to the backyards of some neighbors. And I mean, people were raising all kinds of hell about it. People were very upset about it. They were angry about it. And so what happened is people started talking about suing this institution. And then they were pushing back, and they had one of the most high powered attorneys in Webster and actually around the St. Louis area. And so I called for a meeting with the neighbors and with the folks who are developing this property are adding to it. And some of the neighbors said, "Well, no, we want our attorneys there." And the retirement home said, "Well, we're going to have our attorneys there." I said, "No, I don't want any attorneys there. We're just going to talk as neighbors and as the developer and figure out what we can do together." Because once attorneys get involved, I mean, things kind of go off the rails because people are kind of dug in and they're not willing to negotiate freely. So what happened was we had a series of meetings, and at the very first meeting, the developer brought their attorney, and I said, "Hi, welcome, but you can sit at the back of the room," because it was agreed that we were going to do this amongst ourselves and empower the citizens in this neighborhood, as well as empower the developer to kind of let go of the usual way of doing business, and to really come together and seek common ground on the common ground, so to speak, the literal common ground, and what could be done as far as how far they can move up to the backyards, what were the negotiating points, like how we could get to yes amongst everyone. And so the attorney sat in the back, actually, and we had a series, like I said, of about 3 or 4 meetings, and they negotiated what the neighborhood was willing to do, how much they would accept of this encroachment, what the retirement home was willing to do. And at the very end, and there was probably about 12 or 14 people there. And I made sure everybody had a say at each of these meetings. By the time we got to the last meeting, I went around and I said, whatever the negotiation was, "Are you comfortable? Are you comfortable?" And there was one person who was a holdout. And I said, "So folks, what do you want to do? We still have so-and-so holding out on this." And she said, "You know what? This has been such an amazing process. I don't agree with everything that's happening, but I will abstain instead of officially voting so we can go ahead with the decisions. So,
Wow.
so I thought that was like really cool, that
That's a
people.
great, that's a great story, not only of a beautiful, positive outcome, but how a leader can make such a difference by focusing on win-win as opposed to us against them, power over power under dynamics. And yet, it was interesting that somebody still asked an attorney to come just because they were afraid of being overpowered in some way, probably. So the power of this show is really that leaders take in this idea that if you create a dynamic of win-win and you stick with a process where you focus on what you want to achieve together, that is in itself a very powerful thing to do. And I do think, and I know this is my bias, I do think women are coming into the fold here because we love collaboration overall compared to competition and
Exactly.
zero sum. It's not that all men are competition and zero sum. I know some wonderful men, but in general, having that balance of
Right.
head and heart, male and female, I think has really been demonstrated in this story of power within and power between. I love
Exactly.
that.
And one of the right when I first became mayor, I found, I don't know, I was reading an article or something, and this was before the internet. You could download stuff. I actually had to cut it out and put it in a frame. Um, but the gist of it, it's a Chinese proverb, and the gist of it is go to the people, learn from them, love them, do your work. But at the end, when you're finished, the people will say, we have done it ourselves. And I think that that is so important because, leaders, good, amazing leaders die, and they're not there anymore. So, like I know that there was some struggle, like after Dr. King died, like who was going to take his mantle, like what were they going to do after that? And I mean, certain people emerged, but I think it's really important for effective leaders, especially in building a civil society, to make sure that other leaders are mentored and given the encouragement to speak truth to power and allow them to be comfortable with that role. Because, I mean, we're all leaders. I mean, we all have the potential to be leaders, whether you're introverted or extroverted, it doesn't matter. It's just that we're not trained to step up and take full responsibility for so many things. You can be a leader in your family, but, in my opinion, I always push people to also be a leader in your community, whatever that shows up like, because we're all connected and all those issues are connected. I mean, the personal is political with a small p, meaning that things that affect your life directly, whether it's public transportation or, any kind of educational issues, like what's allowed in your library or not allowed, like all of those things, people have a responsibility because, it's important that they realize they have the responsibility and then do something about it. And I really wish that people would think like the Iroquois 7 generations down the road. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
anything that people do now, they should be thinking about the effect, whether it's with our family systems, so we don't keep perpetrating generational trauma, or what's our community going to look like in 50 years, 100 years, 200 years? Like my wish is that more people would think along those lines because we would have a very different outcome in our
Yeah.
community.
Well, I have a lot of questions about that I want to ask you going forward about that, but I want to make a couple comments first. One is that, as you know, we were probably drawn together because we believe in developing the leader within every person, and that we believe in that sense of being empowered and connected and all of that. But it also means knowing when to lead and follow, whether you have the title or not. And so a lot of people, they're not comfortable with that. But your little story about, when they change and then they think that they are the one that changed on their own. That's what it made me think of your purpose statement, inspiration. When you inspire somebody, then they aspire to be different. And it's not a feeling of somebody made me do this. Somebody controlled me to do this. It's somebody inspired me to do this. And then that transformation is supported by you. which was a great example in that story you told about the 14 people coming together. And then there was laughter, there was relief, there was a softening, even in the person that didn't vote. She didn't vote against.
Right.
So that whole thing reminded me of inspiration, transformation, and laughter, which is what you are all about, and why you have been so drawn to life work systems because of that shared power model. My question to you, and I think what you're going to say about this, but I don't know for sure. Why do you think more people don't see themselves as capable or confident in picking up that power and using it for good, the way that you're saying, gosh, why aren't more people leading when they need to, stepping back when they need to follow? Why is that happening? Why do you think?
I think a lot of it has to do with our social connections. It has to do with a lack of critical thinking skills. It has a lack of the fact that like adults like don't really know how to empower their kids to be responsible, fully engaged in things. I think a lot of it has to do with kids being on videos all day. I know I sound like, well, back in the day, we barely had a TV, but like seriously, like, you know, kids are so sucked in to social media. And I know this is just a quick aside, but I'm, you know, I believe like, you know, a lot of progressive ideas, obviously, but I am thrilled that kids in a lot of school districts don't have their phones during the day now, because I think it's important for kids to really focus on the people around them, their teachers, and not be distracted, so they can really focus on the lessons that are being offered, so they can participate more instead of being distracted, so they can really, if it's a good teacher, you know, they'll encourage the kids to give feedback, to present in front of the classes. And when you're focused on those things, your brain works differently, and you become more engaged in the process of learning. You become more engaged in the process, like with your family or friends, actually talking about issues that are important. You know, a lot of people will say like, oh, we can't talk about politics or religion. Well, I mean, personally, I think those things are really important to talk about in a civil society, because those things have such huge repercussions. So again, I think it kind of goes back to people being not just in silos politically, but also like social media silos, where we're not out talking and discussing, like, you know, the idea of the town square has, you know, I just think that's so important. And sort of the town square more or less is now, and I know it sounds kind of funny, but like a Starbucks where people go in and they talk and they discuss things. And when you do that, it not only generates conversation, but it can help generate solutions for things. And it can also help empower people who may not have thought like that they even had the ability to do, you know, to step up and speak out about something.
So, Terri, I'm going to agree with some of what you said, but also ask you to look at it in an additional lens. First of all, I agree with you that the way we raise children in homes and in schools does not necessarily encourage them to be participating in their lives. You know, it can be more like talking at them or telling them that they have to comply and conform and obey.
Right.
It's a big part of it. But I also, and social media and being so distracted, all of those things do not contribute to their critical thinking, their collaboration skills, all of that. However, many of us at our age, because you and I are very close in age, are still not participating in their lives and in their world and in their politics and religion or whatever,
Right.
the way that we do. And they were conditioned without all that social media. Like you said, we barely had a TV sometimes, you know. And so what is under that? Because to me, that is also about a certain thing that, you know, happened to all of us in childhood.
Of course, 100%. 100%. I mean, you know, it's one thing for kids, you know, you can kind of understand it with kids. And I just didn't mean to say it only applied to kids. It applies to everyone who doesn't have the resources or the guidance or the opportunities to become more empowered. Like, I taught the Children's Model United Nations for several years, and we would partner with the county schools, which usually were more economically well off, and city schools or districts, or we would partner with a wealthier county district and a much less economically stable other school district. And so I remember I was at one school district, and the kids, I trained them for like, I don't know, a month or so. And, they had to pick a country. They had to, be able to, you divided up the kids, and one would talk about the country's resources, the economics, whatever. And all the kids would kind of have their roles to play. So, so what happened was that, at one of the last ones I taught, the kids, they were all prepared, and, they were excited about this. And at first they were kind of reticent, even like to get into it. But, I made it exciting for them, and it was fun. And one of the things I taught them, and I know this sounds like it's not a big deal, but like the power of a firm handshake, how to look somebody in the eye. And then I said, now what I need you to do, I need you, for the girls, and these were sixth graders, I said, you need to get like a skirt or a dress. And gentlemen, I want you in a suit coat. And I want you to use, like how you're going to shake hands with people, and like the teacher and some of the other teachers were like, well, like they just don't have like access to that. And I said, we're going to find a way, because I want these kids to feel good about themselves. I want them to feel empowered, because I mean, just the power, like to know how to give good handshake. Like I said, I know this sounds like on such a basic level, but it's really important to people to be able to feel like they have, control over that they're presenting themselves. I mean, this is just like the very beginning stages of empowering somebody. So when the day that it came to go to the Model UN, the boys were in some of their dads' or borrowed neighbors' suits with the with their sleeves rolled back. The girls were like in skirts or dresses that might have been a little too big for them. But the point being is that they stepped up. I had the bar here instead of here. And I said, you can do this. I know you can do this, and you need to figure out a way. And if you need help, I will help you with it. So I just thought that was really important for those kids to know that, they were just as important as the kids in the wealthier school district, and that they had to have worked a little harder for some of the things, like to go to this presentation, but they were able to do it. And I could see I almost cried, because like they felt so proud, and they felt, because at the beginning when I first started teaching them, like, they just really weren't into it. But by the time we actually did it, I mean, these kids stepped up, and it takes that encouragement, and it takes that love of what you're doing, and the love for the people you're doing it with, for them to feel like they not only have, the right to do it, but they also have the responsibility to do it.
Right. And Terri, what I would say to what you're telling me is that was not a small deal, because everything you did was intentional to help develop the power within those kids. And the clothes weren't about the clothes or status or looking better or any of that or some kind of gimmick. The intention was, you are worthy, you are worthwhile, you matter, you have value, and you have power that is okay for you to exercise, even in your handshake. And I do believe that's where it starts, because how many kids are taught, to some extent, even today, it's be silent, be small, play small, even though it's not, be seen and not heard, or not be seen and heard, whatever that saying is. It's kind of still along those lines, like, don't be too big, don't be too full of yourself.
Right.
If anything, kids need to know that they have power, but to, like you said, be guided in it, so that they know how to use it with intention, with purpose, with authenticity. And so I don't think that's a small thing at all, because of the intention with which, and look at how they bought in, because they felt connected. They felt connected to the people they were representing in their work, the people that they did that handshake with. So I think you're kind of answering the conditions and conversations that really create shared power. Are there any other stories that you have about that? Because I know you did that with your own kids. I know you do that with the wedding couples that you work with.
Well, this gets back to like some of the trainings we've done, together, the whole idea that everybody needs to feel powerful, lovable, contributing, and connected. That is that's sort of the balm for if that was truly used and integrated into our everyday lives with everybody we interact with, this world would be so different. With my kids, same with your kids, like, you empower them, although sometimes, like at some point, like, when they're like, responding or whatever. Sometimes I wanted to go back to the old thing because I'm your mother and I told you, stop using the Judy Ryan trick on me. Stop it. Off. It's like, because I'm the mom. And sometimes that's just good enough. But overall, my kids are, very powerful young women. And, yesterday I had my grandson over, well, not just him by himself. He's 5. He couldn't drive, but I mean, he came with, my daughter and her husband and my another daughter who's in town, and my sister-in-law. We were just all outside having his birthday party, and Ozzy was mad at me about something, and he had partied all weekend for his birthday as much as a 5-year-old can party. There was just so many parties. He was just overwhelmed, and he's really acting up, and he was mad at me and about something because he was tired. And my daughter says to me, "Mom, I think you and Ozzy just need to have a talk about this because he's really frustrated, and I think you need to like talk about this and work this out." And part of me is like, my God, the kid's 5 and I'm in the middle making spaghetti for dinner. Come on now, I got to do this later. And so I went up to I said, "Do you want to talk now?" And he said, "No, I'm mad." I said, "Well, that's okay." I said, "You can be mad for a while." And I said, "Just let me know, when you're ready to talk." So I noticed a difference. Like, I mean, I worked really hard, and like even like before I met you, and all this stuff was coming into the field of area in psychology and conflict resolution, like how to deal with your kids to empower them. And my kids have really taken that up, like whether in their professional life or my one daughter who has like I said, my grandson, that they're willing to do things even better than I did it.
Yeah.
I think that that's so important that each generation learns from the previous one, the good stuff, and that they not just learn it, but they put it into practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of good parenting, you and I don't know that our audience knows this, but we were part of a big school reform project where we involved the parents, the teachers, the school administrators, the students, and everybody, even sometimes the community, all simultaneously. And Terri and I led the parenting group
Loved it.
because they all ended up with the same concepts, terms, tools, and processes. Terri, do you have any memories of where that made a big difference in your view with those parents and with that school?
I know for a fact that the parents, by the time that that course, the program ended, because of the feedback parents gave to us, that they felt that they had a lot more tools to deal with their kids, and they felt more empowered, that they knew that they were making their kids' lives better. And they didn't just use it for the kids, they used it between themselves as partners. They even were saying, like, we're using some of this stuff at work, whether it was the dialogue tool or, kind of shifting the idea of being more confident, more power within, and using, the concepts of building trust, among their family members. And I remember they would set up family meetings, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
They were willing to do that with the kids. And actually, like, I know you would let your kids lead meetings. And I remember Sheila, who was one of the parents, talking about like how, like they would like let the kids start the family meetings. I mean, and it's really scary in a lot of ways doing that. I mean, just that whole process, because, you learn a certain way of being and doing things, and to shift from that can be so hard. As parents, I mean, and just for heaven's sake, for elected officials, like to shift out of the way things are always done. And like you had mentioned before, I really do in my heart believe that women are all about collaboration, connection, and community. Not that men aren't, but that's why I think it's so important for like women to have those opportunities, whether it's in political office or in corporations or wherever. Education, instead of being mainly men at the head of our educational institutions, to have a much more shared power base, because you need that balance, and you need people to be able to bring those different perspectives to
Yeah.
the.
Yeah.
They're both valuable.
I think the reason women do less violent crime and murder and all of that is because
We're too tired cleaning the house and taking care of our families. We don't have time to go out and kill people. No, go ahead.
well, I think it's because we don't like power over, power under. We have been on the losing level of the power under part, and some of us struggle with being too much power under.
Right.
But as a result, we don't like that win-lose power over, power under. And I think most men don't really like it either, but they've been kind of conditioned that that's what a man does, so a lot of them buy into that or get caught up in that and don't know how to get out of it even when they want to. But going back to a little bit about the school project, what was so beautiful about that, I remember the students were learning the same skills, which we always used to tease them that they could now redirect the negative behavior of their parents and teachers,
They love
But
that.
there was one student, I remember he was a big rebel in the student training. And our instructor for that group was frustrated with him and wasn't sure he was getting any of it. And I went to one of his family meetings. And it was so funny because that student said, "Oh, we need a mind trust," which is a commitment that they won't gossip about each other.
Right.
"Oh, we need an appreciative inquiry question here." Like he was naming the tools and knew how to apply them because he really was getting so much. So even in his, I got to be cool with my friends, he was absorbing life lessons that we had brought about to not only the parents, but to those students and to the teachers and all of that. Because you talked about speaking truth to power. It's also speaking respectful truth from power to power, so that a child or anybody in a subservient looking position doesn't hold themselves as only truth, but I have power also.
Sure.
And that's so important to model. And I think that's what you do, is you model it. How do you help married couples in your wedding business to do that?
Well, what I do is one of the tools that I use is a book called The Five Love Languages. And all my couples find it valuable. And people can be together like a year. I've got a couple who is together for 18 years that I just married. And so the five love languages, basically, I tell them that it's emotional intelligence, and that it's really important to become more self-aware, more self-managed, know how to manage their relationship better. Because when they are more self-aware of what it is they want and need, then they'll be able to communicate that better to their partner. And sometimes when I'm doing the meetings, sometimes couples are actually fighting about it. And I'm like, okay, all right, we might want to rethink this whole marriage thing until you figure this out, because this isn't looking too good right now. I've had just two or three couples through the 400 or 500 I married over the last 10 years do that. But other than that, most of the time, they're like, "Oh my God, I never knew about them," or this part about them, or yeah, so this really helps, expound on that so I understand them better. Because my whole goal is sometimes I don't feel like I'm doing enough because I'm not in elected office anymore. I mean, I'm still very involved politically and doing all kinds of stuff, but not elected office where I have more control over it. But then I was thinking the other day, I think I am making a difference in people's lives by helping them become more emotionally intelligent. And a lot of times we have blended families, or I have blended families that I marry, and there's stepfather, stepmother issues. And I'm like, you need to get the book, Love Languages for Kids or whatever for teenagers. Because when you become a better parent to kids, 5, 6 and up or whatever, any age, but you know what I mean? Where you can really talk with them or whatever, that when how to do that better, you are not just empowering yourself, but you're empowering your children, your future children, or your stepchildren. And that way it makes for a better family dynamic. So, what's the saying? Peace starts in the home or whatever. And so if I can help create the dynamics for couples who will eventually become parents, who are already parents, to make their family lives more peaceful, more empowered, more joyful, give them the skill set that they need instead of screaming at each other about something. Like, okay, like this is, I can see like she needs like, words of affirmation, and I'm not doing that. And like, how do I go about this to make them feel better so we can negotiate, or so we can, solve the problem? Like my sister-in-law, like she's like super high words of affirmation, and I'm like really loud. So I remember one time, like I was helping her move into her house, and she was backing up or somebody was in the van backing it up, or maybe she was backing it up and she couldn't hear me. The window was up, and I was like, back it up, go this way. And she rolls down and she goes, stop yelling at me. And I'm like, oh, for God's sake, I'm just trying to get you to not like fall off the sidewalk. So, but I know like with people who are high words of affirmation, they're sensitive to tone, they're sensitive to how loud you are. So, all this is going through my head, like, and I'm thinking, I had to like kind of like pull it back so she could calm down, so she could do what she needed to do, to get that truck parked. I know it's kind of a silly example, but like those tools come in really handy.
No, it's not a silly example, because just like myself, by doing this work, we're continually learning and growing in our self-awareness, our social awareness, our relationship management, all of it. And I love it because you're talking about the effects on the kids, but also even before a couple has kids, just being with each other in a new, more thoughtful, more respectful, more confident way has a ripple effect all over the place. Like you said, with all these step in-laws and split families and all of that, the more our society can see civil relationships, understanding between people, empathy and receptivity to one another, that is, it's not just in the family, it's really in the neighborhood and in the society. It is a civil society.
Like do this at, like, I'm like, you can use this at work. I go, okay, maybe not the physical touch aspect so much, because there's laws about that. Sexual harassment, I go, I don't want anybody to misinterpret anything you're doing, but pretty much anything else, like the words of affirmation, the idea of the gift giving, receiving gifts, the acts of service for people, the quality time, like you can utilize most of those all the time. Well, you can use them all, but it just depends, what situation you're in. And then I've even had couples who are like, you know what, we're going to get this book to our parents. We're finished. Not the kids, their parents, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
They go, they've been having issues. And I'm like, I get it, so the idea, is that whatever tools that you can use, the better. And people just don't have a lot of access to that, or they don't know about those things. And, I just think that it's really important that people do have, like I just said, access to it, because it makes them better. And you had mentioned, like also in the neighborhood and the community, and like, and I've been able to diffuse situations just as you have, through the years with these skills. I always think about, the train story, the Japanese, it's one of my very favorite stories, about how to diffuse a situation like that. And I've used those skills, to diffuse situations. So it just makes for better relationships with both people and strangers.
Yeah, yeah. So Terri, I know you mentioned that one of the challenges that you see to creating a civil society is these silos where everybody's separate. Are there any other challenges that you have faced, either personally or, in your role as a mayor, or in any way that you think were really difficult to overcome around the commitment to creating civil behavior? Any challenges that you remember that you think, oh my gosh, that was a hard one, but I finally got through it?
Well, as far as like empowering people or challenges, when I was mayor, I wanted people to feel more connected to their government. And local government is one of the most important forms of government, because you're more closely connected to your mayor or council member. A lot of people, like don't keep up with stuff, but they still want to feel like the connection, like, going on to 5-8 years after I was mayor, people still thought I was the mayor, for God's sake, because a lot of people don't keep up on stuff. I'm like, well, thank you, but no, I'm not making that $50 a month anymore, but thank you though. But anyway, and it really was $50 a month, not enough for therapy. But anyway, so at the meetings I had, I started asking the department heads to come. And they were like very annoyed at first. And we only meet 2 Tuesdays a month. And sometimes there's breaks, like, maybe like a 2 week vacation in between the 2 weeks or whatever. But they had not done business like that where they come to the council meetings, because my whole thing was like, go, oh, Judy Ryan, she's got a question about some housing stuff. And so I would have the head of housing step out in the hall and try to like figure out what they needed and then set an appointment right there, because I wanted the responsiveness. I wanted people to know that we are the government and we're working for and with you. The whole idea of, I considered us servants of the people, but also that by serving them, that we're empowering them. And so, and making them less frustrated and making them more trusting in government when they see results. So I had a lot of pushback with the department heads, a lot. They were mad about it. But eventually they got used to it. But it was really hard for them to come from that kind of power over background, like we're the authority figure. I mean, I'm not saying they were all mean people, but they were just they were set in their ways of how to do this. And of course, they were all men. But the point being is that it was really hard for them to kind of step into a role of more of a shared dialogue with citizens one-on-one, rather than kind of hiding in their offices and letting, sort of their underlings take care of some of the problems. But I really wanted folks to know that this is their government, they're connected, they have a responsibility to speak up and to work with the people in the government, and we were there for them.
You know what, Terri, I love this, because that's why in our projects, and I wish I would have done this during the school, we mix all the levels on purpose. And that's what you were forcing those leaders to do, is mix with the levels. Mm-hmm. And they didn't like it. And that's a really common thing. I think a lot of leaders are unconsciously bought into this idea of invulnerability, and they can't look like they don't know everything and all that stuff. And really, when people feel a sense of ownership with those leaders and a sense of camaraderie with those leaders, they're much more bought in and much more willing to move as a collective together. And I just think it's beautiful that you, as a woman with all these men, could bring that power within without diminishing them, with actually helping them step into more courage, and the society, the community, step into more connection with them, which ultimately did meet those 4 core needs for them to feel empowered and lovable and connected and contributing, which they were avoiding so that they wouldn't maybe get attacked or whatever they were afraid of. So it's a really powerful story that you as a woman could demonstrate. I can be firm and respectful. I can hold a high expectation, but I don't have to demean you. No. Why are you smiling, Terri?
Because I was thinking of when I first was mayor, like I would go to the department head meetings, and no mayor had ever done that, because technically we're part-time, but I still worked about 50 or 60 hours a week. I mean, the pay is not there at all, but I did it because I had the honor and the privilege of serving my community. So I took it very seriously. My daughters were 6, 4, and 2, and I won. And so anyway, my youngest daughter, Emma, did not have, we couldn't afford childcare. And so I would have to bring her to some of the meetings. And I remember the first meeting I went to, all these male department heads were sitting around. One of them said, Emma's just sucking her pacifier, coloring, quietly, because, she knew she had to behave. And one of the departments says, well, why is she here? And what is she doing here? And I said, I'll tell you what, she's being better well-behaved than you are right now. And I don't make the money you guys do, because either your wives stay home and take care of your kids, or you can afford childcare. And until that changes, so I was also in kind of a joking way, trying to help educate them to the struggle of female politicians and some of the stuff, that we still face.
Well, and it's amazing to me that you literally made, what was it, $50 a month?
Yeah. Not enough for therapy.
And so a civil society is a society in which people are generous. They give of themselves. They go above and beyond, even when the pay or the thing that people would say, well, what's in it for me? In a civil society, there is healthy interdependency. Mm-hmm. There's not a rugged individualism. I'm going to take, and the heck with the rest of everybody. So I love that people that are civil are generous. And you're a really good example of that. And it was good for them to know, wow, I'm not making a bunch of money. And look I have to bring my daughter because nobody's there, can't afford this. That's really putting in the face of people, this is what win-lose looks like.
Exactly.
Without trying to shove it in anybody's face. It was just a reality.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know we talked about briefly, I know we don't have much more time, but like one of the questions like we discussed is like, some of the people who what do you call like inspired me or whatever. And I really thought about that. And I thought about people like Malala,
Mm-hmm.
two young women, who totally stepped up and their parents helped empower them, obviously, but they really took and ran with that. And as young women, they get all kinds of flack. Well, anybody who stands up and speaks out, is going to get massive pushback because we still are, you had mentioned at the very beginning, under this patriarchal system for the last 5,000 years or so. And it's so hard to break out of, and the patriarchy hurts women and men alike. It's a very damaging social construct that we've created and perpetrated. But these young women, Malala almost died, and Greta Thunberg has been arrested, for fighting, to do what we can against climate change. And so, or to stop, the horrors of the climate crisis. So, but the point being is that they still do it, and they do it like in the interviews, like, with joy and laughter, and really trying to change the dynamic of how people interact with the issues that affect them. And they're such good role models for younger girls too, and for boys too. I think it's important, that boys are educated on these issues too, around women, because we're all in this together.
So Terri, as we are close to wrapping up here, how would you encapsulate what you're saying in everything you've said in the words of wisdom you would want to leave with our audience today?
Oh boy. I mean, because not everybody's going to be like in an official leadership role, but I mean, I just get back to like that Chinese proverb. I mean, for me, it's always been sort of like a guiding light for me. So whatever it is that you're doing, just the gist of it is that, whether it's your family or your community or whatever you're working in, that, you make a difference or work to make a difference, and know that a lot of stuff, what you're doing now you're not going to see it come to fruition, but it's really important that you do it because you have a responsibility to the people who come after you, whether it's your family or your community or your country. And that's how you create deep and lasting and positive change.
Yeah, you're really talking about love one another in essence. And Terri, what I want to say is I chose to honor your wish for those words of all the people, in a civil society of all people, for all people, and by all people. And you embody that in your passionate commitment to creating the power within every person and to inspiring them to use it for good. You are truly inspirational, transformational, and causing laughter. We got to go with that. Thank you so much, Terri.
All right. Talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. You've been listening to When Everyone Wins, where we're shifting power over and under to power within and between. I'm Judy Ryan, your transformation talk radio host. Tune in each second and fourth Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific time to learn new concepts and tools and listen to conversations I have with thought leaders and change agents. You'll also see real-world applications of what I'm covering so that you experience the power of the concepts and tools I share. In each episode, I bring you my knowledge from decades in workplace culture transformation and leadership development as the founder and CEO of LifeWorks Systems. I invite you to call in with your unique stories and questions. The path to ensure that everyone wins depends on our ability as people to create a life we love and help others do the same. For more information, visit lifeworksystems.com.